What if death is less like a sunset and more like a sunrise you forgot was scheduled? Imagine the moment your heart stops as an unexpected enrollment, a 49-day intensive where the teachers are your former selves. The classroom walls are woven from every emotion you ever triggered in another mind, and the final project is a map toward your next incarnation. A forbidden Syriac manuscript sealed away in the desert for over 12 centuries lays out the syllabus in meticulous detail. Edgar Cayce, speaking in sleep states 1,000 years later, recited the same sequence to bewildered physicians. Tibetan lamas chant nearly identical instructions to the newly departed. 3 cultures, 3 eras, 1 truth, deliberately trimmed. From mainstream doctrine, you are not judged by a cosmic magistrate. You are illuminated by your own consciousness. The cemetery is not a landfill of extinguished lights, but a campus of evolving lanterns. The sooner you understand that, the sooner fear loosens its grip and life enlarges far beyond the horizon you once mistook for everything. For 2 millennia, pulpits, civics classes, and glossy documentaries have repeated a single headline. Death is a binary gate. Toe the doctrinal line, and a divine concierge escorts you to a cloud condominium. Cross the moral wires, and you plummet into eternal combustion. That story is brilliant social engineering. It keeps populations compliant, economies humming, and hierarchies unchallenged, because terrified minds will buy absolution by any currency available: tithes, taxes, or unquestioned obedience. Yet the forbidden Syriac Codex quietly contradicts every threatening sermon. Its brittle pages describe 7 luminous corridors through which the departing soul walks, each corridor devoted to honest review and voluntary redirection, never condemnation. Cayce's trance readings, totaling over 14,000 sessions, confirm the same itinerary. The life flash is not a verdict, but a diagnostic. Even Western cardiology is struggling to erase the evidence. Peer-reviewed resuscitation studies at Southampton and NYU document patients accurately recounting events that occurred minutes after their EEGs flatlined. Those findings slip into journals, then vanish from textbooks edited by publishers financially enmeshed with pharmaceutical conglomerates whose profits depend on a strictly biochemical model of consciousness. The pattern is unmistakable. Keep the public certain that nothing survives the skull, and you keep their purchasing panic alive. Travel agencies promise once-in-a-lifetime adventures. Luxury watch ads whisper, "You only live once." And political operatives peddle apocalyptic deadlines. Scarcity of time is the single most powerful sales tactic ever invented. Introduce the possibility of multiple lifetimes, and the entire architecture of urgency tilts. A soul that knows it will have future. Bodies buys for meaning instead of status, votes for vision instead of fear, and labors for legacy rather than short-term applause. That sovereignty is expensive for systems built on impulse consumption. The manuscript at St. Catherine's details how marketers in late antiquity learned to weld eschatology to commerce, pilgrim badges, indulgence scrolls, even certain early insurance models trace direct lineage to the threat of eternal loss. Modern algorithms merely automate the technique. Swipe through any social feed and notice how mortality trigger phrases cluster around flash sale buttons. Scarcity psychology is a spiritual hijack. The first antidote is perspective. A physical lifetime is indeed finite, but consciousness is serial and accumulative. Once you know you will live again, with full responsibility for the ripples you set in motion, the logic of your calendar flips. You act from stewardship, not desperation. You create value designed to echo across horizons. You may re-enter. Decades of near-death research have produced testimony too detailed to dismiss as hallucination. Subjects describe surgical tool colors behind blinded eyes, recount conversations in distant waiting rooms, and relay data verified by hospital logs. When cardiologist Pim van Lommel published these results in The Lancet, skeptics highlighted brain chemistry as explanation, yet the same patients displayed no cortical activity on electroencephalograms. Cayce's descriptions of a transitional mind lattice echo the disembodied vantage points in these medical records. Meanwhile, quantum physicists such as Henry Stapp argue that consciousness may be a non-local field interacting with the brain rather than generated by it. The forbidden manuscript anticipated that notion by depicting the body as the clay lens through which awareness focuses, not the source of the light. Such convergences threaten the intellectual monopoly of pharmaceutical economics. If suffering is partly spiritual dyslexia rather than purely chemical misfire, the cure cannot be patented. Research funding predictably veers toward pill-centric paradigms. Yet the anecdotal tide rises, and with every revived patient who retells an out-of-body saga, the foundations of strict materialism erode. The doctrine of a bearded magistrate dispensing eternal reward or punishment offers institutional religion two priceless advantages: moral leverage and membership retention. Fear of damnation corrals seekers into denominational pastures, while hope of exclusive salvation generates tribal loyalty. Yet when third-century theological councils debated canon, passages hinting at reincarnation and self-guided afterlife review were excised or labeled heretical. The Syriac manuscript preserves those deleted lines, describing how early Christian mystics held mirror meditations to pre-experience their life reviews in advance, thereby accelerating moral growth without reliance on ecclesiastical intercession. When such practices threatened tithe streams, Church Fathers redirected attention to external sacraments. Cayce's modern echoes of that wisdom were similarly marginalized, dismissed as a cult because they decentralize authority. To maintain hierarchy, the gate to eternity must appear locked from the outside, otherwise every pilgrim becomes their own priest. The body exhales its last breath. Awareness retracts from nerve endings like tide from a shoreline and floats into the first corridor of the astral plane. Here, consciousness faces a panoramic replay, not a highlight reel, but a fully immersive, multi-angle experience where you inhabit both yourself and everyone you affected. A compliment feels twice, first as the warmth you gave, then as the blossom it sparked in another. Cruelty returns as a blade whose edge you now feel along with your victim. No celestial bailiff stands by. The mechanism is automatic, woven into the energetics of causality. The Syriac Codex calls this the Chamber of Echoes. Cayce explained it as meeting thyself. Tibetan texts warn that clinging to shame turns the mirror into a maze, while embracing insight turns it into a doorway. Acceptance, not guilt, is the solvent. Souls who pass their actions with honest compassion glide onward. Those who wallow in self-reproach freeze inside loops of unprocessed remorse, creating the folklore of restless spirits. Beyond the mirror awaits reunion. Cayce spoke of affinity groups, while the manuscript names them companies of concord. These are the souls you have looped with across eons, sometimes as family, sometimes foe, always co-educators. Recognition transcends memory. It is a resonance that hums through the subtle body. Together, you dissect recent lessons. Where did love triumph? Where did fear distort intent? Then comes the drafting of potential lifelines. You propose scenarios. Others volunteer catalytic roles: benefactor, antagonist, fleeting stranger whose 5-second kindness reroutes a trajectory. Free will is absolute. No agenda is imposed, yet the gravity of unfinished themes exerts pull. Decline an opportunity, and it will reappear in fresh costume until mastered. Ancient seers painted this as karmic debt, but the manuscript frames it as curriculum design. Debt implies judicial oversight. Curriculum implies scholarly ambition. The difference is crucial. Punishment stunts, purpose propels. Here the journey turns from counsel to cleansing. Residual attachments, unresolved addictions, possessiveness, vows of vengeance, manifest as weights on the subtle form. Cayce described these as thought construct chains. Tibetan masters use the term bardos of desire. The Syriac text instructs specific sounds and visualizations to melt such bindings. Souls incapable of release hover near the living, inducing poltergeist phenomena or emotional turbulence in hosts whose frequencies match their unresolved longing. Indigenous shamans developed psychopomp rites, drumming, smoke passages, hymn tones to guide these wanderers. In modern hospitals, death doulas replicate the practice with bedside affirmations and guided imagery. The field of release is where haunting either ends in liberation or cements into folklore. The choice remains internal. Acceptance detonates chains. Fixation forges them. Having shed residue, the soul approaches the threshold that separates astral corridors from causal planes. Here intention crystallizes into blueprint. Choose Earth again, and variables click into place. Geography, era, genetic template, critical crossroads engineered to awaken latent virtues. Opt for service in higher realms, and you join collectives that weave energy currents through nascent worlds. Cayce referenced councils of light, orchestrating evolutionary nudges, genius flares, peace accords, paradigm breakthroughs, whenever collective frequency ripens. The Syriac Codex depicts these councils as architects carving luminous symbols into probability fabric. Entry is not elitist, it is vibrational. Intention is the password, coherence is the keycard. Souls who linger undecided may loop the 49-day cycle until clarity dawns. Time in this bandwidth bends to inner alignment. Reincarnation is neither exile nor sentencing, it is elective advancement. Some graduates incarnate in tumultuous epochs intentionally. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Anne Frank, souls who compress vast growth arcs into brief lives for collective catalyst. Others remain bodiless, serving as muses who seed inventions, art, and leaps in social conscience. Tesla described his revelations arriving as if dictated. Many creative surges begin in the councils Cayce witnessed. The forbidden manuscript assures us none of this negates personal agency. Ideas are offered, not imposed. Discernment remains sovereign. Those who choose to return accept amnesia as tuition. Forgetting prior wisdom levels the playing field, ensuring lessons root through experience, not rote memory. Yet intuition, déjà vu, and prophetic dreams leak hints from the higher self, soft signaling when a pivotal choice nears. If the mirror phase awaits, then every conversation, private thought, and mundane gesture becomes rehearsal. Knowing you will literally feel the echoes you cast reframes ethics from rule-following to resonance crafting. Patience replaces grudging tolerance, because future you will ride inside the other person's relief. Honesty becomes easier when you realize self-deception simply delays the moment you must watch yourself lying. Generosity stops being saintly sacrifice and becomes strategic investment in coming empathy dividends. Ancient Christian hesychasts practiced hourly conscience audits for precisely this reason. Cayce advised clients to keep nightly journals titled My Soul's Ledger. Modern psychology calls a similar habit closure loops. Regardless of label, the effect is identical. You shrink regret before it fossilizes, making the eventual review a celebration rather than a self-inflicted gauntlet. When the cemetery transforms in your mind from storage lot to study hall, urgency mutates into purpose. Begin simple. Each dawn, ask, What storyline am I expanding today? Fear's sequel or love's revolution? Practice 1. Deliberate kindness. Invisible to algorithms. File one outdated grudge into forgiveness. Invent one creative solution that outlives the news cycle. These may seem trivial, yet in the 49-day classroom they function like exam bonus points. Evidence that you understood the assignment. Should you wish deeper guidance, cultivate resonance, meditation, integrity, shared service, those frequencies ping the counsels whose assistance arrives as uncanny timing, protective detours, or midnight instructions tucked into dreams. Share this knowledge openly. Hidden truth stagnates, circulated truth galvanizes. Speak to the living about the dead as active allies, not bygone shadows. Teach children that the moral arc of the soul spans multiple lifetimes, rendering every choice, both seed and harvest. Fear fragments, perspective integrates.